I want to welcome you to the next OU Israel Gustav and Carol Jacobs Kosher Education Center podcast, preparing us for Pesach. And this time with Rabbi Yissachar Krakowski. Rabbi Krakowski, a gitten Erev Pesach. How are you?
Good in Kosher and Freilichen Erev Pesach. Baruch Hashem, very good. It's always nice to be here with you, Rabbi Berman.
How were we able to get you away from your phone and focus for 20 minutes on inspiring the Jewish people and what to do on Erev Pesach?
This is part of it, isn't it?
It's like I told Rav Ezra that hopefully this will enable people to be able to listen to a podcast and not have to call with additional questions. So that's one of these goals of these podcasts, is really to give people the information so that they get to deal with the situation on their own, and it's really beautiful. So, Rabbi Krakowski, I think one of the biggest challenges that people are having is if they grew up in the States and they made Aliyah, or they live in the States and they came here for Pesach, they're suddenly dealing with kitchens that are very different than the kitchens that they're used to in the United States. Whether it's the materials that we use for the counters, the materials we're using for sinks, etc. And they might be used to koshering in a certain way in the United States. Koshering might be a little different here. Could you give us a rundown? Let's go through the different appliances and the different elements of the kitchen in order to be able to make sure that people have a clear understanding of how to kosher the kitchen. First of all, if they arrive to a hotel the day before Pesach, could they assume that their hotel room was already koshered, that the sink in the hotel room is koshered, that the microwave in the hotel room is koshered?
I guess we'll talk about hotel rooms first. My experience with most hotels is that actually they don't take too much responsibility. The Ashkachan hotels don't take too much responsibility for everything in the rooms. So they might, maybe something like a kumkum, that little water boiling pot or something like that. They might, the kettle, they might replace that for Pesach, or they might take it out of the room entirely for Pesach and put, on every floor, if it's like a program, they might put on every floor a mini tea, coffee area or something like that, and then that would be Kosher Pesach. It's probably prudent that they should ask whoever the Rav HaMachshir of the hotel or the program is what they did do. Maybe they'll get lucky and they will have koshered, more than that. But very often that's actually an oversight. One of the things that I've heard a lot about is people who have been discovered on Pesach, some chametz that was left behind from some previous guest under the bed. Somebody even one time had a story in the safe. Their wife opened up the safe on the first day of Chol Hamoed Pesach. She hadn't opened it over Yom Tov. I guess she was wearing all her jewelry for Seder night, and she wanted to put it away before some trip on Chol Hamoed or something. And she opened up the safe, and in the safe there was somebody was safekeeping a roll there, I guess, from the previous guests.
Didn't want his kid taking a shawarma.
So they wanted to know what to do on Pesach. That was one time we received such a question. Obviously not from an OU certified hotel, but
if they're staying in the Ramada or the Jerusalem Gardens, which are both OU certified, could they assume that the rooms have been koshered as well?
So the rooms would be koshered. We either take out those kettles or replace them for Pesach kettles in hotels that we do. And likewise, if there would be any other cooking apparatus that is kosherable, we would either kosher it or remove it. And if it's somebody staying in like a suite that has a kitchenette and the kitchenette has some sort of burner and it's a burner that's complicated to kosher or can't be kosher and we can't really take it out, so then maybe we wouldn't, but then we would usually cover it up for them before they came.
Gotcha. So ideally, people stay in OU hotels. It's the easiest. If you're going elsewhere, make sure to ask the Rav HaMachshir of each hotel what the situation is, because you cannot take it for granted.
I would recommend suggesting to all the hotels to take OU next year.
That if the listeners and viewers of our podcast will go to their hotels and say, "Why don't you have the OU?" That will help the OU get into more places, for sure.
It's a consumer's market out there.
Absolutely. Products, hotels, restaurants. We're happy to do a lot of work, but we need the hotels to reach out to us. So what about a microwave? If they walk into the hotel, the microwave is totally clean. They look inside, clean. How would they kosher that for Pesach? Is it kosherable?
So in theory, microwaves, this is convenient.
This is for a hotel or an Airbnb.
Right. So in theory, microwaves should be kosherable and should be relatively easily kosherable. Now I say in theory because not all microwaves are created equal, and not all microwaves work the way they're supposed to work. The idea of a microwave is actually it moves around the molecules in the food, and like we know when you heat up something, the molecules start moving, but the converse is also true. If you move around the molecules, it becomes hot. So the way you heat up the food is really by moving around the molecules. You nuke them, so to speak. So in theory, the food's supposed to get hot, and the walls of the microwave are supposed to stay cool. So if that's the way it works, then maybe you wouldn't even need to kosherize it, to kasher it. We're always going to recommend kashering it. I'm going to get to the reason why, even if it works perfectly, etc., that you would. But the way to really check this, if you have the opportunity to check it, it's always prudent to check beforehand. You take like a potato, and you cut it open, and you put it in the microwave for 5 minutes, 6 minutes, so it should really cook the potato, and then you put your hand on the top wall of the microwave, and you see if that got really hot.
You could touch it.
And if it got hot, so then it doesn't really work the way it's supposed to. And then it's a little bit more questionable if you can kasher it. You might still be able to kasher it, because we're going to discuss how you would kasher it in any event, and that might still work. So the way you would kasher it is there's actually zeil. There's like the moisture, the vapor from the food that escapes from it when you're heating it up, and that is presumably hot, the vapor from those molecules that just moved around, and it will create like a residual amount of condensation, hot condensation around the microwave. Okay. So the idea is to replicate that with just water. And so what you do is you put in a cup of water to the microwave, and you turn it on, you boil it.
Should be just water, no soap
water,
inside.
You don't need anything else fancy, just water. And you boil it, if someone wants to put soap because of chomer pogim or something like that, they would have to use a soap that would be a chomer pogim, then I wouldn't recommend it in a microwave. But you put that, you do that, you boil it up, and then you move it a few times. You repeat that process, which caution needs to be used in repeating that process, because while you can boil a cup of water in the microwave, and it's a convenient way to do it, stam.
Even
the microwave doesn't always heat equally, right? Sometimes you take something out of the microwave and part of it's like really cooked, and the other part of it is still frozen from the freezer or whatever it is. So the idea is because it's moving around the molecules and it has its microwave thing that's distributing the microwaves around the microwave. If in one area it doesn't always do everything equally, so it can be a little bit dangerous sometimes when you take out that cup. So you have to be very careful. Certainly recommend using like a glove and doing it slowly and cautiously, just in case it kind of not explodes.
Do you want to see the water overflow?
So it doesn't really make a difference if the water overflows, because what we really want to accomplish here is that the steam from the water goes all over the microwave. We're not trying to accomplish having a hagala here of hot water. We're trying to accomplish having a chashara through that hot steam, because that's what we're kashering from, is the hot steam that escaped from chametz foods. Somebody just warmed up a piece of pizza there a day and a half ago, right? And what we're trying to do is that we're trying to remove any of that residual condensation that was around the microwave.
Basically, it's pretty simple.
So it's one of the simplest things to kasher. Right? There are those that will avoid kashering it because they'll say it's hard to clean and this and that and whatever it is. But in theory, it's one of the simpler things to kasher.
I'm sure these microwaves are not that expensive today, and it's
right.
Many people buying a microwave for Pesach because it's much cheaper. What do we do regarding an oven?
So ovens in Israel, that's a good point, because that's something that differs very much from a lot of the ovens that, from people or whatever, the kosher the kosher people in America have. Most people who keep kosher in America, for a matter of convenience, and it's they have like a self-cleaning oven, and a self-cleaning oven in America will very often
what's called here periolity.
So maybe we'll get to that in a second. That's what they refer. That's how they refer to something which mimics a self-cleaning oven, but it's not quite the same thing. So a self-cleaning oven, it broils out the oven, and you'll reach a full hachshara, according to all opinions, if you have like a real self-cleaning oven. In Israel, so like you said, they call it paraliti or whatever it is. So that type of thing, it mimics it, and it reaches a relatively hot temperature, but it's not necessarily a full hachshara. In Kashering, we have two concepts: there's libun kal and libun chomer. So libun kal is just is enough that if you had a piece of straw on the other side, that's what the Gemara uses. But nowadays you can use a tissue. that most of us don't have straw lying around our house.
But
Right?
most
But
of us have tissues.
So you'd be able to put a tissue on the other side of whatever it is that you're doing this libun kal on, and it would start to burn from the heat that the item reached. Libun chamor is that it glows. So nowadays the truth is that nothing's going to glow because it's all galvanized metal. So, most probably anything we have in any of our houses won't get to a glowing point no matter how hot it is.
Really?
But the idea is it should be that kind of temperature, which is, certainly in Celsius would be, you're talking about,
400-500.
yeah, and Fahrenheit, about, I think they said 280, 300, something like that. But it's going to be a nice high temperature, and a lot of these paralytic ovens don't reach such a high temperature.
280 in Fahrenheit?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so a lot of these ovens don't reach that kind of temperature, and sorry, in Fahrenheit it's in Fahrenheit.
It's higher, right?
Right. Sorry.
So
Let's
review
talking about 400 or 500 degrees Fahrenheit, and in Celsius you're talking about, it's about
300.
Yeah. So about 500 degrees Fahrenheit and about 300 something Celsius. So that's where Moshe's shir, that mentions that in a tshuva. So the idea is that so the paralytic ovens might not reach that temperature. So it's a matter of contention amongst the poskim of the previous generation already, whether you need a libun chomer on an oven for Pesach or libun kal is sufficient. Moshe Feinstein, right, obviously the preeminent posik, certainly in North America, he maintained that you need a libun chomer, whereas most of the other poskim of his generation felt that it was enough to have a libun kal in an oven, because in an oven you're really kashering from, you're not cooking, even if something really spilled and you have mamoshos, you have something real stuck to the side or the bottom of the oven, right? So you clean that off. We're not so concerned with that because you're not cooking on the side of the oven. You're cooking on a rack in the air that's suspended in the middle of the oven. So the other poskim maintains that we're really kashering from avir, from the air, and therefore it would be sufficient to do a libun kal. Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky held that way, Rabbi Aaron Kotler, Rabbi Shlomo Zalman Auerbach. So there are those that would be lenient.
So Moshe was very machmir on that.
Moshe was more machmir, and the other poskim were more mako, if you will.
What does the OU hold?
We said ask your local rabbi, and we would present it. They're both legitimate shitas. It's nobody's going to tell you, forget about Moshe. Nobody's going to tell you forget about Rabbi Shlomo Zalman. That's not going to happen. Certainly, I don't know you. There is what to be so mechan if somebody wants to be mako, and there certainly is reason for somebody maybe to be machmer if they want to be machmer. So that's a good thing to point out, and it might depend on how necessary it is if somebody wants to be more lenient or more machmer.
Now, once they're using the sprays to clean the oven, etc., the oil breaks down the oil and I forgot
grease
exactly.
Remover.
Right, grease remover.
Yeah, they call it St. Moritz in America.
Exactly.
They call it Easy Off.
Spray shachor הזה, the black spray. So how would we treat the fact that we put this clearly poisoned spray on every corner of the oven before we put on the purity heating elements?
So that's definitely an important part of the kashering process. What we're trying to accomplish that is A, to really clean the oven, and B, that we're being pogem, we're putting in something which is obviously not desirable, so that if there's any remnants that's left there, it wouldn't be desirable. But now, when you kasher year-round, that might be sufficient, even in certain circumstances, just to be pogem, a time which is treif. That's because year-round, things are bottle anyway, so if it's there, we have more to combine with the leniency of just relying on something being pogum, something being disgusting, than we do on Pesach, because Pesach we don't have any bittul to combine with it. So relying solely on that, and that becomes much more complicated to say to what extent does it really need to be, etc. So we try not to use that lechatchila for Pesach, but we try to combine it whenever we're going to be koshering, just in case we don't reach the hachshara, the type of koshering that we want to, and just in case we don't get something to have that little extra bit there.
Gotcha. First of all, thank you. Second of all, I would recommend also when you have the built-in ovens, even after you kosher it and clean the oven, to pull it out, to take out the screws, pull it out, because many times people find pretzels and Cheerios and many other things inside the hole between the areas there.
Certainly. One last thing that I'll also mention is that what often is different here than in America. In America, some people do have the burners, electric burners that are just either glass or ceramic or induction. Here, you don't have, if you don't have gas burners, they don't have the coil electric burners like some people have in America. So that presents another issue with koshering, that you have this, it's one piece of glass. So for Sephardi Jewry, that they hold like the mechaber, like the Shulchan Aruch, that you can kosher glass. So that's less of a problem, where maybe it doesn't need to be koshered even. That's less of an issue. For Ashkenazi Jewry, that holds like the Ramah, that we maintain that you can't kosher glass, right? And the Mishnah Berurah says that we try to act like the Ramah in this sense. Mm-hmm. It's complicated to kosher for Pesach if it might not be possible at all. And then the only thing to really do is, after cleaning it well, is to use some sort of plate in between so that you're not putting the pots directly on it. So that's another thing which for induction.
Would aluminum foil be sufficient?
I wouldn't recommend using the aluminum foil, because the aluminum foil reflects the heat. So what happens is it will become too hot for the glass, and the glass will crack. So you don't want to do something like that. But they make plates that you can put right on top that are just the size of the burner, more or less. So it's still space.
So it heats up the plate, and then the plate heats up the.
Yeah, I mean, it works. If it's induction, you can use the plate for pots that aren't induction. They sell them all the time for induction things, so that you can use it for a pot that wouldn't work on the induction, doesn't have the right magnetic force for the induction burner. But if it's you can buy such plates also for an electric one for whatever reason, and then you just raise it a little bit, and then you have no issue with using that for Pesach, because again, it's going through. You can be mitzar if you can combine the fact that the mechaber is more lenient, plus you have an extra layer, so that even if it's not kosher for Pesach, so you have it traveling through 2 layers, we're not going to be choshesh for what it does to the food at that extent anymore.
Gotcha. Well, what do we do about a platter, a blech? So many times you walk in, you have an electric blech that sitting in the kitchen. It looks clean. Sometimes it's immaculate, but clearly it's been used before. If it's new, clearly there's no problem. But if it's been used before, what do we do? Should we assume somebody put a pita on it?
I mean, I think that you should definitely assume it's chametz, and then the way around that is you can't really kosher, because if you would blowtorch that, even on limun kal, you're going to burn out all the electricity in there. But you can wrap it a few times with aluminum foil. The reason why I say a few times, really twice would be sufficient, but aluminum foil has a tendency to rip, especially you put things on and it gets stuck, and whenever you pull it off.
Well, they do have the thicker one.
Times. Right, so if you're using the thicker one, you can maybe do like one thinner one underneath it, and then one of the thicker ones, if you're really sure that you did it well, that might be sufficient. But that's the idea. The other thing you mentioned was the countertops.
Right.
So, just to touch on that briefly.
What they call in Israel shaish.
Shaish, exactly. So
no matter what it's made out of, it's called shaish.
That's right. So the reason why it's called shaish was, definitely when I was growing up in America, most people had Formica countertops that weren't kosherable, according to anybody. Nowadays, they've also moved on in America, and you have all sorts of different, stone or stone-like countertops. But in Israel, I remember coming as a child to visit, so the countertops here were either granite or shayash chevroni, that very Israeli-style marble that you have all over the place here.
Like
less and less now, unfortunately, because I think it's pretty. But
it's hard to kosher it.
It's hard to kosher just because of the crevices. You have to clean out the crevices, but it's kosherable because it's definitely stone, and stone is kosherable. So if it's a stone countertop, you certainly, according to all opinions, you can kosher it by pouring boiling water on it. Now, some will say that because if it's used with hot things directly on it, so you want to make sure the water is really boiling when you do it. So there's a few ways of accomplishing that. The traditional way was to have an even milubenes, to have a stone that was like red hot almost, that was burning hot, that you put in the fire, you took it out, and you pour the water over that, already hot water over that. But that adds extra koach, extra heat strength to the water as it's coming down on the counter. Nowadays, because of all the electrical appliances we have, there's easier ways to do it. So you can actually use like a kumkum that's still plugged in, or a Shabbos urn, That's that's plugged. That's
Put an extension cord on it.
You have to be careful with that because you don't want the water to get in. Although it would blow. The
Ideally, have
electricity
somebody
anyway.
hold the cord
Right.
and somebody else walk around with the
And
urn.
be very careful. You can open the spout even so it comes out slowly, not too fast or whatever it is, and move it around slowly but surely. Again, everything has to be done with a lot of caution when you're kashering for Pesach. Chamir sakanta yosem yisura. So sakana you have to be more careful about than the isser of chametz on Pesach even, and one should definitely exercise extreme caution.
Are there any countertops that can't be koshered?
So Rabbi Belsky Zichron Racha of OU Kosher maintained that Caesar stone, and now it's already there's newer things in Caesar stone that are the same type of technology, similar technology. So he maintained that those are kasherable. It's like 99% stone, and just a little bit of glue that's mixed in, and it hardens at a very low temperature. Actually, it's not a high temperature even. So he maintained it doesn't have a din of cheres even. That's not like earthenware, which is you can say is also kind of made out of sand or something like that. He says no, this is since it's almost all stone, and it's a negligible amount that's bottle to it. Interestingly enough, Rav Landau from Bnei Brak, the late Rav Landau from Bnei Brak also wrote a long tshuva on it that you can kasher Caesar stone. As I know, a lot of the Caesar stone actually comes from with various hashkachos saying that you can kasher it. So that should be kasherable. Again, others want a different opinion. Everybody's welcome to their opinion, but that's definitely our stance.
And once you kosher it the way you said, do you need to put the aluminum foil or for whatever it is on top of the shaish, on top of the marble?
So, some people
Or is that just to make sure it looks kosher l'Pesach?
Right. So some people I think have that type of thing. This is the way my mother did it, or that's the way they did it in our home and whatever it is, and they have a hard time with the fact that it's different. From a strictly halachic perspective, you certainly don't need to. Now it could be if you're most countertops when you look in Shulchan Aruch, you don't need a kasher countertops. That's what it says, because you don't use it for hot food. It's used cold, so that should be sufficient just to clean it really well. But we like to cover things on Pesach, right? Chumrah de Pesach, because we're very stringent about the prohibitions of chametz on Pesach.
And it gives a feeling of Pesach.
Right. That's actually I told once a hotel that we were having discussion about covering the tables in the lobby or not, and they didn't like it. They said it's not aesthetic. I said you don't realize. I said Pesach, that's the aesthetics. I said somebody comes into your hotel and you might be right that you didn't need to kasher it, you didn't need to cover it. But they're used to seeing covered tabletops. I said I saw it once. I said I was in Tveria on Chol Hamoed Pesach. I walked down the Tayelet there, down the boardwalk there. We have all the restaurants on the side, and you see there's restaurants that have all different types of hashkachos. The places that people went into were the places that had the tables covered because people felt comfortable. They said that's Pesach. You see that you're in Pesach. So I said, trust me. I said Pesach. The aesthetics are to cover it. So for somebody who the aesthetics are to walk down into, they want to come down Erev Pesach into the kitchen, see it all covered with aluminum foil.
Definitely.
So cover it with aluminum foil. B'vakasha.
So we have just a couple minutes left to the show. I want to make sure we're covering both the sinks as well as the faucet and the refrigerator.
Okay. So the refrigerator goes back onto sorry for starting from the end, but the refrigerator goes back to the countertops. I'm really just continuing going on a roll from the countertops onto the refrigerators. Right there, it's certainly cold, right? And any good homemaker will tell you if you put something hot into the fridge, you're ruining the fridge. So, especially digital fridges, it's got it even worse for fridges nowadays because it's digital. It's even more sensitive. So when you put something like that, so generally people are putting cold things into the fridge. You're not really worried about anything hot spilling and being in the fridge, and anything that would be somewhat hot would probably cool down immediately. So really it should be sufficient just to clean it really well. But again, because the chumrah de Pesach, somebody's a little bit nervous and pots are going to be sitting there for a while, whatever it is, they want to cover it, they want to put down some sort of reshet, some sort of, padding or something. It can't hurt, and b'vakasha gesundheit. But if you go into somebody's house, you're visiting your in-laws the first time, and you're about to make a whole scandal out of it, it's fine. It's kosher. The Shulchan Aruch said it was fine.
You can marry their daughter.
You marry their daughter, especially if you're already married. But so that's that. When it comes to the sinks, that's important because in America almost everybody has a stainless steel sink, and stainless steel sinks are certainly kasherable by just pouring hot water on.
Same with the hot urn.
Right. But nowadays in Israel, a lot of people also have stainless steel. but that you still have some of the ceramic sinks and enamel sinks and things like that. And if somebody's coming to place, especially, they're staying in a hotel and that's, they did it with those little white enamel sinks or something like that, then it's not really kasherable. But since we're living in a Jewish country, one of the things that's convenient, you can go into any single hardware store here, and for any size sink, they make an insert with the hole already in the middle. So you just, make sure to take the measurement beforehand so you know what size sink you're buying one for. It's relatively inexpensive. You dump it into your sink and you're good to go. You can forget about it. I remember as a kid in America, you had all these different types of things that didn't really fit and didn't really work, and you got water stuck here and there and whatever it is. It's taken care of over here for you. In terms of the faucet, so they actually sell these things that like these sock-like things that you can put on top of it. I think it's worse. Because if there was any chametz, you're catching it, and now it's going to on the sock, and it's probably going to come off the sock, and then it's going to become part of it again. What you could do is you can actually kosher the faucet. You clean it out really well.
Put hot water on it.
And then, you can even put the hot water. You put a pot of boiling water on the bottom of the spout so that it touches that spout and it kind of goes in, and you'll accomplish koshering it then. So you clean it out really well. Use your St. Moritz or your Easy Off, and you clean it out really well, and then you do that, and you've koshered. So if you're concerned about that, that's the best way. Technically, the water comes out of the faucet; it doesn't go back into the faucet. And if your faucet works well enough that you can actually wash dishes in it, it should have enough of a zerem, enough pressure that it's probably not getting too much chametz stuck in it. What you probably have stuck in it is avnit. It's like the buildup from the calcium and things like that in the water, and that you don't have to be too concerned about. So it's probably something you can be somewhat calm about. The handles are sometimes, it's prudent to clean them well, because sometimes there you can get like real chametz buildup or whatever it is. And you'll be surprised. You have a very nice new looking kitchen after you clean for Pesach properly.
Beautiful. Rabbi Yissachar, Rabbi Krakowski, thank you very much. It was an honor. Look forward to doing many more of these.
Bezrat Hashem.